I'm Linda de Caestecker. I'm a medical doctor, but now retired from that main job, working with Care Visions and loving being part of that wonderful team. And I have a fantastic guest with me today, Lyndsay McDade. And I'm going to start by just asking you, Lyndsay, if you'll tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely, Linda. So thank you for having me on. So I'm Lyndsay McDade. I'm the Fearless Scotland manager for Crimestoppers. Crimestoppers is an independent charity. We were just talking before we came on about the fact that sometimes people don't realise we're a charity, but we are. I've spent my whole career working for youth-based charities across Scotland and overseas as well. I'm a mum, which is a big part of what I do and a big part of what I bring to the charity, I think. I've got teenagers of my own. I also looked after a young person for about 6 years who lived with us, who recently moved out. And I think when it comes to sextortion or any of the other topics that we talk to young people about, I'm a mum and I bring that along with me, and that's a big part of what I do. And I think it helps to understand some of the challenges that we've all got at home and we all have when we're working with young people.
Okay, great. I agree. I think that brings a whole perspective because you'll too be worried about what does this mean for your teenagers and having to talk to
Mm.
them about these issues. So, Lindsay, this word sextortion, it's a new word. It's one that we're becoming more and more aware of. I can kind of think what it means from its how it sounds, but tell us what exactly is sextortion?
So, sextortion, which is also known as sexual extortion, is a form of online blackmail. And in the cases involving children, a form of child exploitation ultimately. It's where criminals threaten to share nude or semi nude photographs or maybe videos of their victim, often to their victim's personal sort of social media accounts, if money isn't paid or if the victim fails to comply with some other kind of harmful demand. That image might be a real picture or video that the victim has shared, or it could be an image or video that's been generated through AI for the purpose of blackmail. So that's what it is. But I think when we talk about the matter with young people and with professionals and parents like you, Linda, there's lots of confusion around what that might be and what that might lead to for the young person, what they might experience.
In terms of sextortion, is this something that is increasing as more and more young people are online? And should we be worried for all our children, or are there certain young people who are more at risk?
So I was approached. The main reason you've invited me is I worked with Scottish Government and Police Scotland last year to create a sextortion campaign, and it was meant to be for young people. And when we create campaigns at Fearless, we always go straight to the young people themselves and we get a feeling for what they know about the topic already, what they still need to know about the topic, and what content they might engage with. And a big thing for us was the fact that they didn't feel very confident that the adults in their life would know much about this either. So this is something that's definitely important for everyone to know about. I was initially approached to create the campaign because we have seen a rise in sextortion right across the world. This is most definitely an international issue. So it was really important for Scottish Government and police and all the various partners involved to create something that young people could engage with and to help the public to understand what exactly this was. It's really difficult. Quite often, a question I'm always asked is how common, how many times does this happen? And I guess it's like an awful lot of crimes, isn't it? You only know based on the number of reports ultimately. And I think it's a crime that's most definitely underreported. That's certainly the feeling and the kind of opinion of, all the kind of different players in the field. The National Crime Agency put out a kind of quite unprecedented alert last year, and they went on to create a campaign that they ran just the other month. Um, and they came out and said that in the first 5 months of 2024, police forces across the country were receiving on average 117 reports each month in terms of victims being young people. Because obviously adults can be victims of extortion as well. And it's important to remember that because so often we talk about young people. But the reason we talk about young people is because they are most likely to be vulnerable to extortion. So according to the Internet Watch Foundation, teenage boys are most at risk of being victims of sextortion. And it's funny because when you talk to young people and you talk to professionals, there's sort of equal surprise right across the board. Because young people automatically presume, and professionals, that it'll be girls that are more likely to be victims when actually it's your teenage boys. In 2023, I think it's 91% of the stats around sextortion for under 18s involved teenage boys and males, and 60% involved teenage boys aged 16 and 17. So it's that sort of 14 to 17-year-old age group of boys that are most at risk. But over the past sort of year, I'd say, or 6 months even, there's definitely been a kind of troubling trend of younger children being targeted for sextortion and becoming victims of sextortion, and also more young girls, girls as young as 11. And there's quite a difference in terms of how what the criminal wants from the young person that they've got an image of and they're threatening with, that kind of the image. Quite often boys will be asked for, and this isn't always the case, but on a and generally, quite often boys will be asked for some sort of financial gain for the criminal. You know, there's that financial motivation to it. So they'll be asked for maybe gift card, you know, the kind of long card number on a gift card, like an iTunes card or something like that, or money directly, or another way for the criminal to gain money. Whereas often girls are asked for more sexually explicit materials, so other more nude images or videos. Of course, boys can be asked for that too, and girls can be asked for money. It just very much depends, but generally speaking, that can be the difference in demand from the criminal. So it's something that's really is absolutely horrendous for the young person to experience that, or as I say, an adult. And it can lead them to think, you know, what on earth do I do? So it's really important that young people know what to do in that situation, how to keep themselves safe in the first place, but also what to do if that happens to them. And that was a very big part of the campaign that we ran from November last year up until recently.
So, if what might be some of the signs that, as a parent, carer, or even teacher or worker, what might be some of the signs you would see in a young people that makes you wonder what's wrong and maybe bringing up this topic?
Do you know the thing that saddened me the most, I guess? When I had originally been approached to run the campaign, Police Scotland were great, and this extortion lead at Police Scotland sort of delivered a big hour-long presentation on sextortion. And first of all, I probably only listened to a small part of it because the whole time I was thinking, oh gosh, why have I not spoken to my children about this? I've spoken about intimate image sharing. I've never spoken about that sort of blackmail sort of request, or the fact that somebody could come with images that aren't even theirs, they're AI created. I've never had that conversation with my young people. So that was a big thing that's gone through my head. But also, the thing for me as a parent that was really worrying about sextortion is quite often there's not signs. Quite often it all unravels so very quickly that it can be impossible for parents and carers and, you know, teachers and what have you to spot the signs. So for me, it was really important through the campaign to try and help young people identify those red flags that this person's maybe not who they say they are, and what they can do to try and to sort of pick up on those red flags before that sextortion kind of begins to sort of unravel and they get that request. Um, it can be hard as parents to know what to do and to have conversations about this. But I think for me, it's about making your young person know that no matter what they're doing online, they can talk to you about it. You know, when I was a teenager, I wasn't on TikTok and Snapchat and all these kind of things. I would never have had my conversations with my mum about it. But now that my children are online and, you know, they're of an age that they're on all these different social media platforms, I think it's important to have conversations and make those conversations about what they're seeing online, even if it's silly videos or trends or whatever it is. Have those conversations as part of your sort of daily chats and your kind of conversation, so that it's nothing their online time and space isn't completely theirs alone and they don't share that. They kind of normalize those conversations. And then I think it helps young people to kind of come to us if they've got concerns, if any of those red flags do start waving, or they're sort of worried about something or concerned about a friend, or they're more likely to talk to us. I think that's probably the biggest thing to do, rather than wait until you see something bad's happened to your young
Mm.
people, that sort of prevention method. I think that's really important. I think it's critical because there's been some horrible instances that are just completely tragic where young people have taken their own lives after becoming a victim of sextortion. And that process, of course, it's different for every young person, but that process from that initial message to the young person not being here anymore can be a very short space of time. So I think it's important to have those conversations about that and keep that sort of online space open and family wide and at the dinner table, or often in the car. I think you can always talk
Yeah.
to your young person so much better in the car when everyone's looking out the window, especially if it's tricky. So I think that's probably the most important thing for parents and caregivers to sort of consider.
Can you talk us through then what these red flags are? What should parents be warning their young person about? And Karen's also saying, are there particular social media platforms that are more at risk than others?
So I mean, Instagram has lots of sextortion kind of issues with young people being approached with sextortion on Instagram, but honestly, it can be right across the board. One thing criminals often do is start off in one particular platform and they're maybe having a conversation about a video, or they've liked some of their videos or whatever it might be, and then they move that young person onto other platforms so that it can be harder to trace. Sometimes it can end up getting to WhatsApp from Snapchat or Instagram or one of those accounts, and it kind of moves across like that. So there's no particular platform that I would say. I think it's right across the board. But I think in terms of the conversation that people have with their young people, I think it's that general conversation about being safe online. And if something just doesn't feel right with you, then stop that conversation right there. It's okay to walk away. Do you know, I was talking to my daughter about she's on TikTok, and she kind of was rolling her eyes because somebody had followed her, and there was an absolute expectation that she would then follow them back and sort of accept their follow. And we were talking about the fact that why is there that expectation? You can
Mhm.
have who you want on your social media account, you know? You don't have to feel obliged to accept friend requests on Snapchat or whatever. So I think that's a really important one. And also to help your young person to understand that just because someone's friends or appears to be friends with one of your close friends, it doesn't mean to say they actually know each other and they are friends. So, what sometimes criminals will do is they'll target a whole community. So, be that a school community, be that a kind of geographical community, or be that a friendship group, or maybe they all follow the same band or the same local project or whatever it might be. So, if they target that whole friend community, it means a young person who would never normally let strangers into their social media, they think, "Oh, well, they're safe because, my friend Ben is friends with him, so it's all right."
Mhm.
So sort of have that conversation around that sort of wider, what does a friend of a friend actually mean? And really it means very, very little. So it's important that they are friends with someone that they actually know in real life. And it's all those conversations. But I think it's helping your young person to understand that idea of trusting their gut. If the conversation is moving too fast, quite often criminals will go from talking about something absolutely mundane to really quite highly sexualized content. They'll also often move to sending pictures of themselves very, very quickly in the hope that you'll sort of reciprocate that. And if that happens and you've got, an absolutely stunning 27-year-old girl in London sending you intimate pictures of herself, you have to sort of question yourself and go, is this likely? This doesn't normally happen. Why might this be happening? And to sort of see it for what it is, which is possibly and very probably the beginning of a sort of sextortion scenario. So those are the kind of key things I would say.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And we've got a comment in the chat about um, a, a 16-year-old young woman, very vulnerable, was challenged by a male on FaceFlow to do nude videos and photos for him, and he would distribute videos and photos she had shared already. And when she refused, he used what's the chat saying bully boy tactics, escalated. She still refused, but he put everything he'd collected on her out anyway. So
Yeah.
that's awful for a young
It's
person.
absolutely awful. It's really important though to stress. You know, I've worked closely, as I say, we're an independent charity, but I work closely with police a lot when it comes to campaign developments and things like this. You know, my background's very much in the charity sector. I'm not a police officer. So everything that we do, you know, we work really closely and get advised by them. And they really want to hear these stories. They really want to provide that support, and they're very well placed too. You know, they're not going to. One of the things when we were designing the campaign and we went out to young people to find out more information about it all, about what they knew and that kind of thing, the young people told us, I presume the biggest barrier to them going to the police and speaking up about this happening to them, I presume the biggest barrier would be that idea of embarrassment and shame and awkwardness. You have to tell your mum, and then you get police and all these kind of no one wants that, least of all a teenager, right? But actually, when we were talking to the young people, they were sort of saying, of course, that's not something that makes me think, oh, Jim, that'll be great. But their biggest barrier was the fact that they thought they would get into trouble for sending that image. So
Right.
often when
Yeah.
we're talking about intimate image sharing, be that in schools or be that as parents talking to our young people or whatever it might be, social workers or whatever else, we tend to sort of focus on that idea that is against the law to send, share, receive, store intimate images of someone under 18. And so quite often young people can hear that from the lesson or the session or the conversation, and they think, oh my goodness, if I've sent that image, then I've broken the law already. And it's as though they don't consider themselves to be a victim. But one of the things we've tried really hard with this campaign to stress, and Police Scotland have been really helpful in doing that as well, is the fact that if you've been coerced or forced or manipulated, like in the case of Sextortion, to send that image, you would never get into trouble. You're the victim, and it is the criminal's fault that this has happened, not yours. And I think that's really important to get across to young people. So, in the
Mhm.
case of that young girl, I would really always encourage the person to go to the police or be supported to go to the police. There's also the report remove tool, which is part of the Internet Watch Foundation and Childline. And if young people under the age of 18 have knowledge of images that have maybe been sent in that situation, or in the case that the girl who's taught that the audience member was talking about, um, they can contact the report remove tool, use that tool to be supported to try and get those images removed from the internet. And that's
So
such an
yeah.
important tool for parents and carers and professionals to know about, to really guide young people too. And the IWF and Childline do a fantastic job with that service. And I know it's something that they are seeing more and more demand for, and more young people using that service. And they're seeing, a huge proportion of the kind of content being able to get removed from the internet. So there's real success there. So I think it's important to remind our young people that this should never ever happen. But if it does happen, there's support and there's things out there that can make it better.
Yes. So in that example, and a few people are saying they'd never heard of FaceFlow. I haven't either, but you may know of it. But she's now been being contacted by about 200 males, um, who are trying to make contact with her. So if you contact the police, does that give you access to this remove tool, or is there another way of getting access to that?
So the report remove tool, you just go online, you can Google search it,
Right.
report remove, and it'll sit on the Internet Watch Foundation website. I think it sits in the Childline website as well as a sort of joint partnership initiative. So you can
Okay.
do that online. And the beauty of it, I would very much, if my young person, my daughters were in this situation, I hope with all my heart that they'll come to me or they'll come to my husband or, one of the other adults in their life, and they'll be supported. But some young people just don't want to do that. And the beauty of the report remove tool is that they don't have to go to an adult. They don't need to go to the police to be able to do that. They can literally do that by themselves on their computer. That's not ideal. Of course, you want adults around them to help them with it, but if that's what they wanted to do, then that tool's available to them. So it's literally an online, it's a website, it's an online portal, and I think that can be really beneficial for young people. They're also prompted through the process. It's completely confidential, and they're prompted through the process to as to whether they want support from like a childline counsellor or through the childline website where there's lots of supports online. So they're sort of prompted at different parts of their sort of journey, and I don't think it takes very long to do. It's a fantastic service,
That's good.
and one that, as I say,
Yeah.
more and more young people are sort of taking advantage of and using, which is good.
But would you also say that eve yes, that report remove tool sounds something that everyone should know about. Would you also be saying in these kind of circumstances, it should be reported to the police as well?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a vulnerable young person who's had sexual images posted across the internet and now has hundreds of other people contacting her, that's a massive, massive safeguarding risk. And that young person's clearly in an awful lot of danger. So I would, as a professional, your own safeguarding policies would obviously have to come into effect, and whatever you would do, you follow your own safeguarding procedures. But absolutely, for me, that's something that police would want to know and would want to be involved in to be able to support and make sure that the young person's all right, but also how many other young people is that person doing that to? And I think it's really important. I think sometimes young people and adults as well, it's like all kinds. Not everyone wants to report things to the police for lots of different reasons.
Mm.
But unless police know how often this is happening, then it can be challenging to to solve it and to make things better. And also quite often, quite often this isn't you're not just talking about individuals who are committing this crime, you're talking about serious organised crime groups overseas. So if it's really important that police understand the wording that's being used, the images that's being used, maybe the IP address or the social media profiles or whatever it is, so that they can try and shut that person down and try and prevent them from doing it to anyone else. But first and foremost, it should be about getting that particular young person justice and safety.
And another example in the chat is the game Roblox. Roblox, is that how you pronounce it? And I've certainly read about that can be quite there can be predators coming on and playing at that game, and yet, we think it's a nice game for children to play. Is that something you've come across?
Um, do you know, yes and no, not specifically around sextortion, but I'm aware that there's been lots of reports that there's lots of kind of exploitation and really unpleasant content as well, kind of violence and other things on Roblox that I don't think as a parent you would automatically think of when you see the sort of layout of the game
Mm,
and kind of what it says. But I think this is about when we give our young people phones or they access social media through their laptop or whatever it is that they use, I think they just have to be really conscious that there's for all the good of social media, and there is lots of good. I've spent my career doing PR and social media campaigns and all that. And there's wonderful good that can come of using social media in terms of prevention messaging and reaching lots of young people and adults and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of benefit, but there's also an awful lot of harm. And I think regardless of the platform, where you have a facility, also on like Xbox Live and things like that, people don't always think of that as online, even though your
mm,
young person can be talking to someone from another part of the world, and you
yeah.
don't know what that conversation looks like. I think wherever you have a situation where your young people are talking to people, you have a risk, just as you would here. Just as you would if they were in the park by themselves and talking to strangers. I kind of think it's a very similar situation. But the quantity and the reach that the young person can have on social media is obviously much, much bigger than your local park.
Yeah, and another example of a young boy being targeted on Discord, and I don't know if this is a carer or a parent or just somebody who knows the young person, but found out and knew it was only a matter of time before the images became more explicit. It'd be good to hear how you found out. Did your young person come and tell you about it? Um, but we've talked a lot about what parents can do in terms of prevention and explaining to young people this is a risk, here are some of the red flags. Also, if you find out it's happening, how you are to be able to help your young person. You are the victim here, and to report it ideally to the police, as well as um, looking at how do you remove things from the internet and um, support your young person. But what can others do in this? Not just parents or carers, but is there something that schools should be doing, or even interested others in terms of the kind of campaigns that you're running?
Absolutely. So there's lots, and I think that's the most important part of all this. I think sometimes you can look at a topic like this and you're thinking of international threats and online social media, and you just think, gosh, it's so difficult to contain and protect your young person from trouble. But I think everyone has a role to play in this, and there's lots of different things that you can do. You know, when we initially launched the campaign, obviously we invited the press along, and I must say the press have been absolutely fantastic. So your journalists have
Good.
been fantastic about continually raising the profile of sextortion and quite genuinely putting out the message that we really want parents and carers and other adults and children to hear. And they've handled it so incredibly responsible. Everything that I've seen, certainly in terms of our campaign, and our press reach got to about 2 billion or something crazy, which has just been phenomenal. So that's been really helpful. In terms of education, I'm really conscious that teachers within the curriculum, there's so much and it's such a
Yeah.
full space. But there's resources there for teachers and other professionals working within schools and youth work. There's COP have a resource through their website. If you go to the COP website, you can get resources there. There's also a website called Ask the Awkward, which can be really good for other professionals, but also parents and carers as well. But I think as well, and also we have a resource actually. We're launching a new resource for schools on Monday, the 9th of June. It will sit on the Education Scotland website and also on our own website. And that's quite a flexible resource. We've created a very short video with young people so that teachers and other professionals can play that video to their young people. And it's like a whistle stop tour of sextortion in a way that young people would understand. And then we've got facilitator notes for them to be able to utilize to kind of have that conversation. Because sometimes it's hard to know where to begin with a topic like this. But also, I think as adults, and as social media users, quite often ourselves and customers ourselves, I think we've all got a responsibility to really question and kind of hold the social media companies to account as well, and to make sure that they are doing genuinely everything in their power to protect our children as much as possible. And I think there's lots of great work being done by the social media companies, but there's constantly opportunities for them to do more, and to work closely with police when bad things do happen and when there's police investigations, and also just using all the incredible tech powers that they have to try and, as I say, sort of pull down these sort of organised crime sort of frameworks around sextortion and try and remove lots of those profiles and try and pick it up earlier. So I think holding people to account for the safety of our children, we can't. I think sometimes as a society we can lay it all at children's doors to watch for the red flags and don't do this or don't do that. But ultimately, as adults in society, we need to make sure that we're trying to make that space as safe as possible. So yeah.
Kathy's got a good example there of the school had sent out email to all the parents and carers because there'd been a significant increase in sextortion cases within the schools. So it's good when schools are alerting parents if they're experiencing that. But also a couple of examples in the chat of um, parents or carers saying, "Well, I checked his phone," or I looked at his internet use. Is that I mean, we we don't like to invade our children's privacy, but we do have to know, are they operating safely? What's your view on that
A really
as
hard
a
one.
parent?
Is and as a parent, that extra part is I think is really important. So I've been at quite a few events recently, and my answer as a professional might be slightly different to that as that of a parent, and I can't help it. Um, my children do have, they've got Google Family Link. There's lots of other ones available, but I do have an app on my children's phone that I can make sure, their phone goes off at nighttime, so their phones automatically turn off at, well, 9 o'clock for my youngest, 10 o'clock for my older one, and it doesn't come back on again until 7 in the morning, and small things like that. I pay their phone bill, I pay for their phone. So there is an expectation that if I ever really wanted to go on their phones, then that's just part of the deal. But I also understand children and young people's right to privacy, and and that's incredibly important. And I don't think you build trust by going through your phone sometimes, like I wouldn't want my husband, not that I've got anything to hide, but I wouldn't want my husband or anyone else going through my phone or my handbag. It's that sort of same idea, isn't it? I think I think there's better ways than going through people's phones. I think having those really open conversations that young people know they can come to you with things and you won't be blindsided and you won't, get angry at them or freak out. I think that's more important and I think that's important. Um, my young people quite like the app that they've got on their phone because when they inevitably lose it 5 times a day, I can press a little button and it beeps even if their battery's off and dead. So there's pros and cons to it in their mind. But it was just one of these things that was a non-negotiable for me. But I understand there's a real concern around children's right to privacy on social media and online spaces, and I recognise that completely. But I do think it's about parent judgment, and we need to do everything we can to look after our children. I wouldn't let my children out in the street at 11 o'clock at night or midnight, so I'm not going to let them be online at that time either when I'm sleeping and I don't know what's happening and I'm not around. So it's about parental judgment, isn't it?
I think that's right, and as Sally said in the chat, it's not about being nosy, it's given all we've been talking about, it is about keeping your young person safe, and
100%. And I
yeah,
think, I think it's a really hard time to be a parent and carer at the moment. I
yeah,
think because you sort of feel sometimes like you can't do right for doing wrong. You want to, our young people are talking about their rights and, all that comes with it. And we want to make them responsible citizens and we want to make sure they know how to navigate these issues without us, micromanaging and helicopter parenting and all the things people talk about. You want to be able to give your children that and provide that for them. But I think there's also an element of ultimately we also need to keep our children safe and be empowered to do that and be helped to do that. And, you know, when you're looking after a young person, that's the most important job you could ever have. And I think that needs to be recognised. And as
yeah,
long as I think you're doing it with a good heart and you're doing it with and alongside your young people, I think that's important.
yeah. There's Paul's asking, "What app do you use to turn off their phones at night?" Is that the family link?
Yeah, that's what there's lots of apps out there.
Yeah,
That's just the one that I personally use, and you would have to if you Google, I'm sure there's lots and lots of pages online that will give you the lowdown on the kind of the pros and cons of all of it. There's ones you can pay for, ones that are free. Um, for me, it's nice that I don't need to think about it, and it's just something that happens at a certain time. And I think when it's not in response to something and it's just that's the way it is. I don't have my phone in my bedroom, like, we just don't do that, and I think sort of developing those good practices is important, not just to keep your child safe today and tonight, but also for when they're older as well,
yeah,
and when, there's lots of criticism of these kind of apps and that sort as I say, that sort of parental sort of management of these things, lots of criticism there, and a lot of it I recognise, but I think it's about helping your young people to make good choices in their future when they are adults. And it's about routine, isn't it? And it's about getting into sort of good habits. And I think that's something that we still need to do lots of work on when it comes to social media, not just for our young people, but as adults as well. How
Yeah.
often does our phone ping and we immediately look at it even though we're in the middle of 3 other things at once? I am very guilty of that when I'm at work. And it's my work phone pings more than any other one. So I think it's about developing those good habits, and that then has a knock-on effect to all the sort of harm and crime that can happen on that online space as well.
And there's a comment, a really good comment that you can speak to your young person and they're saying, "I know all that and I won't get caught out. I'm very alert." And then because these predators are so skillful, they think, "Oh, this is me in a relationship. This is my boyfriend or girlfriend." And so they do start to share things that they wouldn't if they thought it was a
Definitely,
predator trying to take advantage of them. So
definitely.
how do we
And
get that across?
I think it's really, do you know, I think that's a really important point, and I think sometimes we do young people a disservice telling them the obvious and thinking they're going to listen and think they're going to. No one thinks they're going to fall into the trap of any of these kind of things. Eh? Like as adults, we would never think that we're going to be scammed or whatever. We think we're better. We think we know more than that. But you're talking about highly sophisticated criminals who are experts in manipulation, you know, and I think they have to explain that to young people and make sure that they recognize that anyone can be a victim of this. You know, you can have all the common sense in the world and you can be really savvy to online safety and all those kind of things. But this can still happen because you're human, and there's criminals out there who are very good at manipulating this of what they do for a job. They're professionals in it almost. And I think that's important to get across to a young person. And I think it's about, you know, it's not just that one conversation about sextortion and then that's you done. It's kind of coming back to it and sort of circling
Mm.
around it. And, you know, if there's things in the newspaper or things on social media or whatever, on our website, I think Ben was going to add it to the chat. On our website, we've got 2 pages. We've got a page about sextortion for adults who work with and look after young people, but you can click through to the sort of youth page, and that's for young people. And there's videos there, and there's lots of different things there for young people to be able to understand the topic for themselves. Sometimes a young person wants to go away and read up about it in their own time too. They might not be very receptive to your conversation. They might be, hopefully they will be, but they might not be, but that information's available for them in a kind of language and in a way that they would understand.
And would that website then have some of the other links you've been talking
Yep.
about? Because
So
there's a request
all
to
the other
have
links I've
those
spoken about
links.
today. So on our adult page for Sextortion on the website that, as I say, Ben will share, um, there is a video for you to watch, and it's with me again, unfortunately, but it's also got Police Scotland and NSPCC, and they talk about sextortion. It's sort of 5 or 6 minutes long, and there's links to the report remove and tool, and it sort of explains that a wee bit more, and the COP resources and things like that for professionals and for adults who look after young people as well. There's also information about the Children First support line, which is really important. You know, it can be sometimes for parents and caregivers, they might feel they've gone too far. Do you know, their young person might already be in difficult situations online, and it can be it's not a starting point conversation. They're kind of coming to it when things are already tricky. And the support line at Children First is absolutely brilliant to be able to provide parent and caregivers that sort of additional information and support through that process. It's not something I always thought if you phone someone like that, you would maybe speak to a different person every time, but apparently not. You could sort of arrange to speak to the same person over a period of time to be able to kind of get that support through the process. Because, you know, as adults, we need as much support to navigate all this. You know, it can be really difficult to know. So there's lots of information on our website, and for our young people in the youth part of the website, there's a short video and there's lots of links to kind of more youth friendly kind of projects that they would kind of want to get involved with or learn more information from. So that's all on the web.
So the Children First helpline is for parents and
Parents and
carers.
caregivers. Yeah,
And
so
you've got some other links for if a young person has gone through this and must be feeling distressed or concerned, that is there somewhere they can go and talk to
so
someone?
through the whole process, through the whole campaign, we've been really clear that young people should ultimately talk to a trusted adult. They should report it to police. They should talk to a trusted adult, get that help. But if they didn't feel that they could talk to anyone in their lives at that point, then they can contact Childline. So that has been Childline's been our sort of main call to action for young people if they're really worried or want to get more advice or support or something bad's happening, they're needing information and sort of support through that process. So Childline's our main call to action for young people, and that all the information about Childline and the service they offer, because it's obviously not just the phone number. There's a webinar now and a website, the online forum groups, and there's lots of different services provided by Childline. It's excellent. So all the information is on the youth part of our website.
Great. So that's the go-to place, and
Definitely.
we'll make sure that's in the link. Do the police catch many of the criminals who are doing this? Given it's often organized crime, maybe international, how often do they manage to prosecute people?
So it varies, and it varies right across the world. And I think police, even if there isn't a huge success rate in terms of being able to catch someone online abroad, that obviously brings lots of challenges for policing across the UK and across the world. But I think all of them would say, certainly Police Scotland, who have worked very closely with on this campaign, they want to. They don't go into it thinking, "Oh, well, we'll just give support and we won't." They absolutely want to bring the perpetrator to justice for that young person or for that adult if they've been a victim. There's obviously big challenges when it's from overseas and you're dealing with social media companies for IP addresses and all that kind of thing. So this is a relatively new kind of form of online blackmail and exploitation,
Mm.
so it'll take longer. It's still a wee bit early to say what that success rate's gonna look like because it's not something that can, if someone commits extortion tomorrow, it will take a period of time to be able to bring them to justice, and that would obviously take longer because of the international element of it. So I don't think we're necessarily in a place where we can see how successful that is right now. I think that'll become clearer as time moves, if that makes sense. But I think it's really important. And I think Police Scotland have worked so incredibly hard to understand this topic more and to learn about it and to try their best to try and find a way forward for all the young people and adults that are affected by it. So I would really encourage people to trust in them and be able to report that to them.
And your campaign, which it was great to hear that it was mainly developed or co-produced with young people themselves. Do you feel it's been successful? Is there a way people like ourselves can help get that message out more or
Yes,
use the
absolutely.
campaign?
Please do go to our social media platforms and share it when you see it. And through the link, you'll be able to share that link on your social media platforms as well. I am really chuffed about the campaign. I'm really delighted young people have worked with us, but so too have families who've been involved in this and lots of other people. And it became a really important campaign. I run lots of campaigns every year on different crime topics, and this one became it was really important to me, and it felt very close to my heart. So far we publish our evaluation of the campaign on the 9th of June when we're launching our
Or
education resource. But we've had tens of millions of impressions for the social media campaign online. In terms of our social media, we've had hundreds of thousands of reach. We've had just under 100,000 young people and adults go to the website to learn more. And for a small country like Scotland, for just a singular campaign, I'm really delighted that it's landed well. But there's no way we could have did that without the young people who have been involved in the co-development of the campaign. As I say, if I was just developing the campaign based on what I knew when we first started this whole thing, it would have looked far, far, far different to what it actually became when young people were talking about, the barrier for them, that idea that any adult would, give them into trouble for becoming a victim of something that horrified me. And it was really clear from them that real element of reassurance was incredibly important, and saying to them, "You're not gonna get into trouble for this. Police would never, you're a victim." And so that completely changed the whole sort of feel of the campaign and the whole tone and messaging, but also made us realise that we needed to create content for adults, which originally wasn't the plan. And that adult content has been incredibly well received. Um, and through the website, being able to sort of link to other organisations and hopefully try and, when I first came into this campaign, it felt really new, and I thought, "Oh gosh, what am I going to refer people to or how much work's getting done if this is quite new?" And actually there's lots of resources there. And, parents and caregivers, yes, it's really overwhelming and it can feel like a massive, massive topic. But there are really fantastic services and organisations there to help you navigate it. And whether that's resources for schools and youth groups to have these conversations with our young people too, so it's not just all on you, or whether that's like the support line from Children First or Police Scotland support that they can provide, and the information from ourselves and the Internet Watch Foundation and everyone. There's lots of services there that can help you have these conversations and help you if the worst did happen and your young person or yourself became a victim.
Yeah. I'm just aware there's so many social media sites that I've never heard of, and they're probably growing all the time. And even though parents who are um, do more social media than me, they are probably finding that as well. So it can seem overwhelming, and it's really helpful to know there's all this support out there. And the first place, your website, to go and read it and look at it. But Lindsay, is there other things that I've not asked you about that you thought you really wanted to get that message out?
I think the biggest thing for me is that feeling of reassurance and that there's support all around you, and there's plenty of information there. The chat is sort of representative of, I think, how a lot of people feel. There's always something popping up where you think, I've never heard of that before. But there's lots of information online if you know the right places to go. So we go into the website and click into the various and all the links that we've got on the website are all really trusted ones that we really went through and we know that are accurate and are safe and are providing good information for people in the UK and primarily Scotland. It was a Scotland campaign, so that's mainly all kind of Scottish links. Um, if not national ones. So, yeah, that's the main focus for me. It can be hard. It can be really hard as a mom of teenagers, and also, as I say, I look after a young person who just moved out a year ago. Um, and even that idea of, well, we'd spoken very briefly, Linda and I, and the young person I look after is came to the UK as an unaccompanied asylum seeking child, and all the differences in terms of our communication and how we talk about online safety and all those kind of things. So often unaccompanied young people come to the country and they've not had all the PSE lessons or the PL lessons, as my children call them in school, all the kind of the different things that you have throughout primary school and high school. Even nurseries have so many important things in their sort of PSE and health and wellbeing curriculum now. And quite often our unaccompanied young people miss out on that. So it's really important that if you're a carer of an unaccompanied young person, you work with the guardianship service in Scotland, and you recognise that maybe they need a wee bit more support, and recognising the sort of the challenges that are online. I know my young person, his phone was a really important thing to him, and that sort of being able to communicate with the rest of the world, and he didn't
Right.
really have many friends here. So again, that made him more susceptible to going online and, using different gaming sites and all that kind of stuff. So, and trauma as well, having gone through an awful lot of trauma, he would have been a wee bit more vulnerable to. So we've had lots of conversations about sextortion. Um, and I think that's important to recognise as well through our website, not just for sextortion, but for all crimes and for information that we have. At the top right hand button in the corner, you can change the website into, I think it's over 150 languages. So you can get the information there. So the young person can access our website and they might want to choose to view it in Arabic or Vietnamese or any language that they want. And that can be really important to try and make it a wee bit accessible as well. Through the campaign too, we kind of looked at that whole accessibility piece. And so we created an easy read version for Sextortion because we didn't feel there was some accessible resources online, but they felt quite dated and they weren't talking so much about social media threat for Sextortion. So we created an easy read resource, and we also have information in BSL because it's important that all young people and adults recognise this crime and have the kind of appropriate, timely information about it that's accurate. So all that website information's on the website as well.
That's great. And a really good question from Rebecca, just as we're drawing to a close, whether you link with GP surgeries to educate them, because they may not really, unless their parents might not know much about this, but some of the victims may end up at their GP surgery with anxiety or other mental health problems because of this.
Absolutely. So we're quite a small team in Scotland. There's only myself, and we've got two part-time members of staff. So we're a very small entity for Fearless across Scotland. But I delivered some webinars around Sextortion when the campaign launched last year. And daftly, the way you go into these things thinking a certain thing, I thought it would be mainly teachers and youth workers. It was for professionals. I thought they would automatically come, but we actually had quite a number of doctors,
Good.
sexual health workers, and a few other NHS contacts that came along to the webinar. And I know that they've been really keen to sort of share that amongst their NHS sort of areas. And I know we had a couple of people from the NHS come to the kind of initial launch as well. So I would hope the information, and certainly the information is available to anyone who goes to our website to try and get, or through Google. The press was so high for the campaign. You'll get links that way as well. There's lots of articles about it, so the information's there.
No, that's great. And this has been such an informative session. So thank you for coming along and telling us more about sextortion, what to look for, but also about the campaign itself. So just to finish, Lyndsay, thanks again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again on Monday and
Thank
having
you,
that live
Robin.
event. And thank you to everybody who's been here, and particularly for all your comments in the chat. There's lots of people saying thank you, Lyndsay. So obviously they found it very helpful.